Hello everybody, this is Steve Locse, and I welcome Stewart Swerdlow again in my channel. How do you do, Stewart?
Hi, how are you today?
I'm just fine. Well, Stewart, we finished our last meeting with a story of the human history actually, and we also showed a lot of entities, and we saw how Lyrians separated and how they became different species actually. And we showed also from your book some pictures of different entity, different races, let's say. Now I would like to continue today from the point when Maldecians and Martians arrived to Maldek and also to Mars, and later they are discovered by reptilians. What happened there exactly?
After the destruction of Lyria, as we spoke about, the survivors, the refugees, went to many different planets in different parts of this galaxy, Milky Way. And here in this solar system, they found two planets that had atmosphere and conditions that were perfect for their life. We know one as Mars, which had atmosphere, oceans. It was very Earth-like. And then between Mars and Jupiter was a planet that has been called Maldek, which was also had atmospheres, weather that was good for human life form. And so some of the colonists developed small civilizations on Mars and on Maldek. And they lasted for quite a number of years, quite a few thousand number of years. And of course, the reptilians, but I should really say the Draco Empire, because there are many different reptilian species, but the Draco Empire was involved in finding all of the Lyrian colonists, refugees, wherever they were in this galaxy and even elsewhere. And they noticed through their probes and their reconnaissance that there were colonies on Mars and Maldek. And so they developed a plan to eliminate them or try to absorb them if possible. And so they sent into the solar system a huge ice comet. And the reptilians use small black holes that they manufacture as a propulsion system in front of the ice comet, which pulls it into whatever direction they wish. And so they sent this ice comet into our solar system, and the power of the ice comet as it passed planet Neptune caused Neptune to flip on its axis, so that Neptune is the only known world that rotates north to south instead of west to east like all other planets do. It then continued on past Saturn and Jupiter towards Maldek and Mars. Now, because of the great magnetic pull of the ice comet, Jupiter, Maldek, Mars, all jumbled up together, it created a great disturbance electromagnetically on the planet of Maldek, which caused Maldek to explode. Of course, before this occurred, the population there realized what was going to happen, and they fled, many of them, to what we know as Mars. Maldek exploded, which created the asteroid belt that we now have between Mars and Jupiter. Then the ice comet continued on towards Mars and pulled the atmosphere and the oceans off of Mars, including 3 kilometers of the topsoil from the northern hemisphere of Mars. And even today, if we look at planet Mars, it's not completely round. The northern hemisphere indents a little bit, where the topsoil, the earth of that planet was pulled off by the magnetic pull of the ice comet. The ones who survived Mars went to the inside of Mars,
Right.
which I think we talked about, certain having hollow.
Yeah.
And so Mars is also hollow, and they went inside of this. And I find it interesting that now the Mars probe rover that NASA has driving around Mars, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I saw an image on the surface of Mars of a spoon that was laying on in the sand of Mars, and they said, could this be left over from a previous civilization? It's very interesting what they discover with this rover. And so so the ice comet then continued on towards the planet Earth, which we mentioned was at that time the second planet from the sun, our sun, and the Earth was at the time, as we mentioned, covered with water. Even the atmosphere was very filled with liquid. And so as the ice comet came close to the Earth, it started to go into a spin with the Earth for a bit of time, and this sped up the rotation of the Earth and caused the oceans to polarize so that land masses appeared. And it also caused at the northern and southern polar regions ice to form from the spinning of the planet in space. And eventually the ice comet and the Earth switched positions so that the Earth was pushed to the third position from the sun, and the ice comet took up the second position from the sun, captured by the sun's gravitational field. And because of the strong light radiation from the sun, it caused the ice on the comet to evaporate, creating a dense cloud cover, and it became the planet Venus, which we now know covered in clouds. But now the Earth was colonizable because there were land masses, basically two gigantic land masses, but there were others as well, but these were the two biggest ones. And so the reptilians, the Draco Empire, drove another vehicle into our solar system and parked it in orbit around the Earth in order to colonize the Earth. We call this new vehicle, we call it the moon. And as I've mentioned in my work many times, the moon does not spin like other objects in space. It's only one side faces all of the time.
This is specially done, specially did this way.
Yes, and when NASA had sent probes to the moon landings, they brought the rocks back, and it turns out that the rocks that they brought back from the moon were older than the Earth and were from a composition which is not even seen in our solar system.
All right.
So it was in effect a proof that this was not from here.
Yeah.
Of course, over the years, there's been many cover stories.
Is it hollow?
About this. The moon is also hollow, and this has also been proven when they send a sonic resonance to the moon. The moon rings like a bell, like it's hollow. It doesn't thump like a solid object.
Yes.
And they also notice occasionally that there are these water and steam vents that suddenly shoot out from various places in the moon as if something inside is releasing waste product or toxins or what have you. The moon actually expels this into space. Also on the surface of the moon is a product called helium-3, which is not found naturally anywhere. It has to be manufactured. And this is covering the entire surface of the moon. And the surface of the moon is covered also with debris that comes from the inside of the moon. It looks like someone hollowed it out and dumped everything on the outside.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also what's interesting, you know, when you look at the stories that were told about the moon, that the craters are from meteor impacts and so on, well, then how can they explain that all of the craters are flat? There is no impact site. It's only flat.
Yeah.
And there's no debris. There's no debris from any of the so-called impacts. Mm-hmm. So when you study all of this, you realize that the moon is a hollow object, artificially created, or should I say, it was once a natural object that was modified and used as a vehicle, which the reptilians are very well known for such things. And so they colonized the largest continent on this planet at the time, which we call Lemuria, and it existed in what is now the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. And very large volcanic island, continent, I should say, and the reptilians lived there for hundreds of thousands of years, undisturbed. They considered it to be their new world that they colonized. Mm-hmm. But when we go back to Mars, we find inside the original Martian colonists, Maldekian colonists, it became a little difficult to live in this occupied space, so many beings with limited resource.
Weren't they brothers, actually, from the beginning?
Of course,
Lyrian
they're
descendants.
We can say that they all have common ancestry, Lyrians. And I also find it interesting that many people who have had interactions, abductions on this world by so-called aliens and so on, many of these beings tell the humans, when the humans ask, where do you come from? Where are you from? And they say, we have a common ancestor with you. And so not all say, but the human ones, the very human ones say, yes, we have a common ancestor. And that some even say they are from this world, which is another story completely, which we can talk about another time. Because the Earth has had many, many civilizations over its history. Mm-hmm. And I can also say that the universe is a bit older than scientists will tell you that it is.
Yeah, that was what you talked about in Poland, actually.
Yes. In fact, scientists will say that they estimate our universe to be approximately 13 to 14 billion years old, when in fact it's much, much older than that, maybe close to 100 billion years old.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very old. And what I also find interesting, Istvan, is just 2 days ago, NASA said that because of their Hubble telescope and other research, they have discovered hidden galaxies that they didn't know existed. In fact, billions of them that were hidden behind a gas cloud, that they were now able to see past the gas cloud, which means the universe is much more, even our galaxy, much more vast than we ever imagined.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then, so you say a reptilian came on Earth first, and they occupied it, especially Lemuria, or Mu, if some knows it by this denomination. And then came, after kind of dispute between the Maldekians and Martians, some of them came to Earth also. What did happen?
Correct. Well, after many, many thousands of years passed by, the Lyrians, who were inside of Mars, determined that there was a need to live on a world with an atmosphere, oceans, and surface, etc. Of course, Earth was the closest one. And it was determined that they would send their own colonies to the Earth. And that's what they did. They then colonized the second largest continent, which we know as Atlantis, which existed in what is now the Atlantic Ocean region. And Atlantis, of course, was a huge continent as well. But over time, as we realize, mammalian life form, reptilian life forms really are not designed to live in the same environment, the same planet.
Yeah.
Different requirements, different culture, mind pattern, etc. And so, of course, there was war between the two.
But there is something that you mentioned in your book, that actually Pleiadians were part, or some Pleiadians were who came to Atlantis, actually.
Yes. They were the very first, they were the experimental group, if you will. Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because the Pleiades, of course, there's been a lot of information not correct about this since the 1960s. The Pleiadian star system has 7 stars, all of which are younger than our own sun. And so, no life developed there naturally. The Pleiadian star system was colonized also by Lyrian refugees, even before Mars and Maldek were colonized.
Yeah.
And there was one group in this system called Atlans. The Atlans were a bit aggressive. They wished to manipulate the other star systems in the Pleiadian system. Yes, correct?
These ones.
Correct.
All right.
And so it was decided by a refugee council, which said, well, you can start your own empire colony in the solar system where the Earth is. And so they were the first experimental ones. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Very similar. They're all similar. Yeah. And so they were first, and when they were successful, then the others came.
But did some from Maldek or Mars come to Lemuria also?
No, because Lemuria was very reptilian. No human type life there. It was a hostile environment for them. Not so much the ground itself, but the beings that were there.
All right, but then when they came to Atlantis, when can we situate in time this event?
As far as the
Maldekians, the Maldekians and Martians or Atlants, when they came to Atlantis or to Earth, when did it happen?
It was approximately 1 million years ago.
All right. All right.
1 million years ago. We are finding now under the ocean, and even in some of the mountainous regions in North America and even Europe, evidence or artifacts of a human nature that are 1 million years old. And that is why sometimes when they dig in a coal mine and they dig up the coal deep from the earth, hundreds of meters down, they are finding artifacts that look modern. A bullet, a shoe, some other device. And how could this have come into this area? Well, because it was from over 1 million years ago.
Okay, but then there is something that somehow some cultures got to Mu or to Lemuria, and there they developed a new culture, let's say. How can we connect these? So maybe Atlanteans went to Lemuria later. How did people get there?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but there was only androgynous reptilian in Lemuria until the destruction of Lemuria, which was about 300,000 years ago. And that's from the war between the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. And after that, Lemuria sank So there was no other colonization except for Australia, which is the largest piece that is left of that continent. And we know that there is a big reptilian nest underneath Australia and in parts of the Pacific. And there are even prehistoric creatures which are seen in these regions even today, especially in the western part of Australia. And so, of course, there's a lot of, how shall I say, glorification in New Age material about Atlantis, etc. But in effect, the Atlanteans were very warlike, and they tried to manipulate the environment and the other cultures around them. And so that's why there was this war that ended with the destruction of Lemuria, but ultimately ended with the destruction of Atlantis. They destroyed themselves with their electromagnetic devices. And that created other cultures globally. And then, after that, there were remnants from the Martian civilization that came to what is now Middle East and created Sumer Empire about 7,000 years ago. And that is interesting why this same region is the center of such conflict even today, because of this migration and the spreading then historically into other continents, which is again another episode, if you will.
All right.
Of history of the Earth.
Yes. We already, many people know about that part of the history, I think. Well, from here on, let's say, we can find also many different researchers work on this history. I mean, Sumer, later Acadia, Babylonia, so on, up to today. And this is a new story already. And so from here on, we will continue to talk about different things. I mean, different part of the story, of the human story. And let's say what happened. So as you said that people, remnants of the Martians, got to Sumer, and they became actually the first human civilization, let's say. All right, but what can you tell us in a few words about the genetic manipulation of them?
Yes. After the destruction of both Lemuria and Atlantis, many of the other colonies from other parts of this galaxy, and even Andromeda galaxy, felt it was necessary to use this Earth as a testing ground, experimentation, etc., to develop new cultures, to see what is the best possible template for future beings. And so many came here, manipulated the genetics, which is discussed in Book of Enoch. I suggest everyone read Book of Enoch. They created different types of animal creatures, hybrids, insects, giants, all kinds of beings. Some were destroyed, some were recreated, some were taken elsewhere. It's a very complex story, but many of those experiments still survive today on the Earth in various forms. Bigfoot, werewolf type creatures, vampires, all these type of things which are put by science in this as fake or not true, they actually do and have existed. And so,
you think vampires existed?
They do exist. Not the way Hollywood says, but
they just drink blood, let's say.
Yes, yes. And in fact, even recently in Germany, for example, just a few months ago, there was a man who advertised for victims and actually had someone come to his location, killed him, drank his blood, ate his body, just
Wow.
like a vampire would do. And these stories are coming up more frequently now. And so it's very likely that this person who did it had the genetics, maybe descendancy of one of these creatures. And so it activated in him, and he had this need to
Wow.
do this.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
Stuart, this is absolutely fantastic. And we will leave it here for now. And we will continue in the next session from the first human civilization in Sumer, and how do we got on the scene. All right. And before we finish, just to announce to everybody that Stewart has prepared a seminar, an online seminar for Spanish speaking people, and we will do it on 28th of January at 16 hour 4 p.m. Spanish time, and that would be 10 a.m. Eastern time of United States, and also, if I don't get wrong, 9 a.m. in Mexico, 9 a.m. also, or maybe 10 a.m. I'm not sure, in Colombia. That would be 12 p.m. Not 12 p.m. Well, midday, midday in Argentina. All right. So the thing is that we will share something very special to you, to everybody, in Spanish. Or maybe Stuart will speak Spanish. I don't know if you want to speak Spanish, or we will use a translation.
Sí, es posible. Todo está posible.
Okay, very well then. Stuart, very shortly, what will be the theme? Hyperspace, as we understood a little bit.
I think for the beginning, some information about hyperspace work, yes. But I think very important for the world now, especially for Latin American people who may not have previously access to this information, that we need to talk about programming and mind control and how to fix this.
Very well, very well. You must know also that the seminar will be done in 2 parts. All right. The first part, as I told you, in 28th of January, and the second part will be at 4th of February. Also, each of them is Saturday. All right. So at the same time. So everybody is invited to come, and you can contact me. You can contact also Janet or Stuart. Maybe Janet, right? Better. And you will get here the links and emails and everything to contact. All right. So go ahead and start already to reserve your place, because we only have 22 places. All right. So see you next time. Stuart, thank you very much for this intervention.
Thank you.
And for everybody else, a big hug, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye for